However, today's debate is not about whether community import tourism is beneficial. The motion before this House is whether community import tourism is the only viable way for Jamaica to compete with the private island model of the Northern Caribbean. The debate does not ask us if it is good, but it doesn't even ask us if it's the best. It asks if it is the only way for Jamaica to compete. And opposition completely rejects that idea. Now, the burden is extraordinarily high for a proposition to prove, and it's one that a proposition simply won't meet. Before I establish my team's case, let us first understand where a class would lie in this debate. Proposition would have to prove two things. Firstly, they'd have to prove that community import tourism is capable of helping Jamaica compete. Secondly, and far more importantly, they would have to prove that no other viable pathway exists. That is where we would destroy the proposition's case. Opposition does not need to prove that import tourism is bad. We merely need to demonstrate that Jamaica has other viable methods of competing. The moment alternative pathways exist, opposition wins the debate. This is important because proposition would have spent much of their time in the debate romanticizing authenticity, culture, and local experiences. However, we are happy to concede any of those benefits. However, beneficial does not mean exclusive. Effective does not mean unique. And that distinction is how we would have won the debate. Allow me to now get into my first substantive point. Jamaica's success in tourism already proves that diversification, not solely in community import tourism, is the basis of competitiveness. The proposition would assume that Jamaica's ability to compete hinges on community import tourism. Yet the evidence demonstrates the exact opposite. Jamaica has recently recorded over 4 million annual visitors and more than 4 billion US dollars in tourism earnings. These achievements were not driven solely by community tourism. Rather, they were driven by a combination of resort tourism, stopover tourism, cruise tourism, entertainment tourism, sports tourism, wellness tourism, and major foreign investment. That is over five other viable options that Jamaica used to compete against the private island model, proving that the community import tourism is not the only viable option for Jamaica's tourism sector to compete. Now, why is this significant? Because if community import tourism were truly the only viable pathway, these other sectors would either not exist or they would not be succeeding. Yet Jamaica continues to attract billions of dollars in hotel investments, thousands of new rooms, expanded air connectivity, and new international markets. The country is actively competing through multiple channels simultaneously. The impact is obvious. Proposition's case would have collapsed under the weight of reality. Jamaica's own success demonstrates that there are multiple viable methods of competing. Therefore, community import tourism cannot logically be the only one. A second substantive point is that proposition would have fundamentally misunderstood how competition works. Private islands compete through exclusivity and control. There are highly curated environments where companies control spending, transportation, services, and visitor experiences. Proposition would assume that because private islands are succeeding, Jamaica must compete primarily through community import tourism. But Jamaica is not a private island, nor should it attempt to become one. A private island offers a single tourism product. Jamaica offers an entire destination. Visitors can experience luxury resorts, adventure tourism, sporting events, festivals, heritage sites, gastronomy, wellness retreats, and community experiences all within the same trip. In other words, Jamaica's strength lies in variety. Competition is not about beating your opponent at their own game, but it is about leveraging your own comparative advantages. Opposition would have narrowed Jamaica's options to a single pathway, while opposition embraces the diversity that has already made Jamaica successful. The impact is substantial. A country that competes through multiple products is inherently more competitive than one that relies on a single offering. Diversification expands markets, attracts different types of visitors, and reduces vulnerability to changes in demand. As I close, I return to the burden. Proposition must prove exclusivity. We have already shown that Jamaica is succeeding through numerous tourism models at the same time. That alone should make judges deeply skeptical of the motion before them. Community import tourism may be valuable. That is where we make a concession. It may be effective. It may even deserve some expansion, but it is clearly not the only viable way for Jamaica to compete. For those reasons, I beg you to stand with opposition. And before I close, in the absence of a proposition, I'll just do a bit of contextualizing of the motion. The motion asks whether community import tourism is the only viable way for Jamaica to compete with the private island model of the Northern Caribbean. Now, the private island model, it includes the idea of cruise ships which dock at certain islands which are owned by the cruise ship companies and offer entertainment specific rather for these cruise ship companies. So these islands are solely for the benefit of cruise ships, right? The community import tourism has to deal with like when tourists come off of cruise ships and they come into the communities and they come off for that small section. Our case is that Jamaica benefits from very diverse tourism sectors. We benefit from hotel tourism, entertainment tourism, and that is what actually makes Jamaica attractive. And that is why we are glad to oppose the motion today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Second speaker, please introduce yourself to the judges. And before we continue, the first speaker is allowed 7 minutes, second speaker 5 minutes, and third speaker 3 minutes.
Hello, could you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Demar Ferguson, and I'm the second speaker for Cornwall College. I'll begin my time in three, two, one. Honorable panel, fellow debaters, good afternoon. My name is Demar Ferguson, and my first speaker demonstrated that Jamaica already competes successfully through multiple tourism models. My task is to explain why commuting in port tourism cannot realistically function as Jamaica's sole competitive strategy. Before I begin my substantive matter, let me address proposition's likely response. They will argue that community tourism creates authenticity. They will tell you that private islands cannot replicate Jamaican culture, Jamaican people, or Jamaican experience, and that is correct. However, the problem is that authenticity does not prove exclusivity. A tourist may value authenticity, but another may prioritize luxury, another may prioritize convenience, another may prioritize wellness, and another may prioritize safety. Tourism demand is diverse, which is precisely why successful tourism economies are diversified. Allow me to move into my first substantive point. Community in port tourism is inherently vulnerable to external shocks. A valuable, a viable nation, a, vi, a viable, a viable national strategy must be resilient. It must be capable of surviving disruption and continuing to generate income when conditions become difficult. Community import tourism fails the test because it depends heavily on cruise arrivals, international mobility, and passenger movement through ports. COVID-19 exposed this vulnerability with devastating clarity. Cruise tourism effectively stopped overnight. Ports became inactive, visitor disappears, and communities dependent on tourism traffic suffered significant losses. No, COVID-19 was not a unique event. Future disruptions may arise from wars, recessions, travel advisories, fuel crisis, climate events, or global economic downturns. None of these are within Jamaica's control, yet all of them can severely impact port dependent tourism, right? The impact is that proposition models create concentration risk. Entire communities become dependent upon one stream of economic activity that disappear overnight. A strategy cannot be described as the only viable option when it becomes so fragile in times of crisis. My second point is that communities in port tourism lacks the stability required to compete alone. Community tourism is valuable because it is local, it is immediate, and it is authentic. Ironically, those are the same strengths that limit its ability to operate at the same scale required to sustain an entire national tourism economy. Many community enterprises struggle with manufacturer limitation, machinery capacity, workforce training, and international visibility. Even when successful, they typically operate on a much smaller scale than major resorts that tourism development needs. This is precisely why Jamaica contributes to attract billions in the hotel industry. Large-scale tourism infrastructure generates employment, tax revenue, and visitor capacity at levels community tourism alone cannot match. The impact is straightforward. Proposition asks judges to believe that supplementary tourism production become the sole foundation of national competitiveness. The evidence simply does not support that conclusion. Ultimately, what opposition offers is resilience, and what proposition offers is dependence. And in a world defined by uncertainty, resilience will always outperform dependence. And for those reasons, we are pro to oppose.
Thank you. And just a reminder of our motion, be it what? You can introduce yourself to the judges and you can begin. You don't have to count down, gentlemen. It's a presentation. You can just introduce yourself and just go right into your presentation.
Good day, everyone. My name is Andrew Kemmock, and I will serve as the reply speaker for Cornwall College. Beginning my speech, honorable panel, fellow debaters, I am Andrew Kemmock, serving on the third speaker for Cornwall College. At this stage of the debate, I believe there's only one question the judges should answer. Has proposition proven that community import tourism is the only viable way for Jamaica to compete? The answer is simply no. Notice what has happened throughout this debate. Opposition never denied that community tourism is beneficial. We never denied that community tourism supports local communities. We never denied that it contributes positively to Jamaica's tourism product. What we denied was simply exclusivity. The proposition has failed to prove it. Our first speaker has so eloquently demonstrated that Jamaica is already succeeding through multiple tourism models: resort tourism, stopover tourism, entertainment tourism, wellness tourism, and major foreign investment are all generating tangible results. The existence of these alternatives alone defeats the motion. Our second speaker demonstrated that community import tourism is vulnerable to disruption and incapable of carrying the weight of an entire national tourism strategy itself. For example, look at COVID. COVID revealed how quickly port-dependent tourism can collapse. A model that fails under stress cannot be the only viable strategy. More importantly, judges, remember where the burden lies. Proposition chose the word only, not us. The moment multiple viable pathways exist, their case simply falls apart. And throughout this debate, opposition has shown not only one alternative pathway, but several. In reality, Jamaica's greatest strength is not dependent on one tourism model. It is the ability to combine many that we have. Now, that is why Jamaica continues to attract visitors. Furthermore, judges, look at the fundamental flaw in the proposition's logic. They argue that to compete with a private island, we must mimic their isolation, that we must keep tourists tethered to the pair. But Jamaica cannot out private island. Private islands like Royal Caribbean and Carnival excel at creating artificial, hyperfluted bubbles. If we confine our visitors to the port area out of fear, we are playing their game, and on their terms, we simply will lose. Jamaica's true competitive advantage is our shared scale, our culture, and our authenticity. We don't compete with a synthetic beach by building a smaller, gated craft market at the pier. We compete by offering Duns River Falls, the Blue Mountains on a rich reggae heritage, and culinary journeys that span the entire island, not just one place. You cannot fit the soul of Jamaica into a single port radius. And to suggest that doing so is our only path forward into severely undervalues what our nation has to offer. So, because of this, that is why Jamaica continues to attract visitors. That is why Jamaica continues to attract investment. And that is why Jamaica will continue competing into the future. Judges, proposition offered a false choice. Opposition offered reality. For those reasons, we respectfully oppose. Thank you.
And thank you. A round of applause. Gentlemen, applaud yourself. Come on. I know you probably miss Hampton School today, but thank you very much for making the effort. I will allow the judges to deliberate a bit, and then they will read the scores. We're going to ask Mr. Reed first to make his presentation and observations, and then we'll ask Attorney at Law Stacey and Young to finish off. So give us a few minutes. We'll be right back. Okay, we're inviting everyone to return. Do we have Cornwall College? Everybody is with us?
Yes, ma'am.
This is
Judges, are you ready?
Yes, Miss Toller, we are ready.
All right, so you want Mr. Reed to go first with his points, or Stacy, you'll be giving everything?
Mr. Reed, do you want to go first, or you're still mute, so.
I'm mute. I'm so sorry. Yeah, thank you for that. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be participating once again this year. And I must commend the opposers of the moot or of the topic today. And I think generally this was a good session. And overall, I think the motion is the word I was trying to capture just now, was one that, as the opposition would have alluded to, is one that perhaps presents itself in favor of an opposition generally. However, that is not to suggest that a proposing team could not make a strong point or in fact win. It just so happens this afternoon that we have a default winner because we only have one team presenting. That being said, as the rules and as this whole thing is laid out, you don't just pack up and leave. You have to present. And again, I'm happy to see that the presentation was made, the case was made. And I won't be long, but the core of this debate, as far as I saw it, being one of the judges, is not whether community tourism is good or it's not good. It's really asking if the import tourism is the only viable competitive response that Jamaica has against the private island cruise model. And I think that was a key point that both parties would have had to contend with today. And again, I believe the opposing side made a good case as it pertains to, there being certainly a wider and a more diverse pool of options as it relates to this statement is saying. Now, again, we did not have the benefit of a proposing case, but the arguments put forward by the opposers, I believe, generally were strong. From a judge's perspective, it is perhaps not, I would say, the best model to judge someone's strength on their own volition, on their own, presentation, because a debate has to really be matching one against the other. What we're asked to judge is how strong are you compared to your opponent. And so that's kind of a handicap, which everyone here knows. But for all intents and purposes, we had to do the best we could to at least judge what we saw, what you were saying. A lot of good points were presented in terms of expressing the different types of options that you have. When you put that against simply import tourism, I think a lot of those cases were made. As far as the general organization, the arguments, the reasoning, the style, I believe there were strong presenters of the three, and there were some that not as strong. But I think all in all, you did a great job, I must say. I think the case was clearly made. Can't say whether that would have been enough to take you over the top if there was a proposal. But again, that is neither here nor there, because you are the only competitors in the game, and so you have won by default. I'll leave it there, but again, congratulate you on a good showing. Congratulate you on keeping hope alive in terms of young people being involved in this kind of thing, academia, in terms of, thought leadership, looking at solving problems, and being involved in making a difference. How do you make a case as a student towards something that is really of national importance? You do have a role to play. Your voice is important. And so I would just encourage you to continue what you're doing, and of course, applaud the organizers of this very great event. And once again, thank you all for being for hosting me and having me here. And I'll hand over to my erudite co-judge at this point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reed. Good afternoon, gentlemen and members of the audience. It was an absolute pleasure for me to join this afternoon as a guest judge in this second match in the national tourism debate. The motion being, be it resolved that community import tourism is the only viable way for Jamaica to compete with the private island model of the Northern Caribbean. Now, my co-judge, Mr. Reed, would have already, extended congratulations and kudos, and I want to echo his sentiments in respect of the attempt that you guys made this afternoon to bring a very vibrant opposition to the motion that was presented to you. As he said, I agree, a debate is normally a debate when there are two sides competing. So, it would have been really good to hear the proposers of this moot and to see what angle they would have come with in presenting a very strong motion with respect to something that is very relevant, and something which I would agree with Mr. Reed is of national import. But again, congratulations to Cornwall College, you have won this match. And it was, I'm not going to say it was easy this time because you still had to get there, you still had to present, but hopefully my comments moving forward are taken as constructive comments that you can utilize to improve your performance for your next match. So I'm going to take it from a different angle than what Mr. Reed took it. Mr. Reed was giving you all of the credit and all of the kudos, and I'm now going to give you some very constructive criticism. Mr. First Speaker, Mr. Ellis, could you please indicate your first name again for us?
Good name is my first name is Tegwan.
Tegwan, can you spell it please?
Tequuan.
Okay, all right. You see, when you have a fabulous name like that, you talk about it, and when you're introducing yourself, you introduce yourself very, very clearly, so that everybody knows that you pronounce it. And I think that that's one of the things that I would say, except for your third speaker, I think your diction and your pronunciation is something, especially if you're using a microphone, it's something that you need to pay attention to. Definitions for me, I know that you are opposers, right? But the areas that you're being judged, and I know that your court will be in possession of this information. So when you come to a debate such as this, you're being judged on analysis, definition, and interpretation. That is the first 15 points that you get. Analysis, definition, and interpretation. So even though you're opposers, you still have to address definitions, interpretation, and analysis in your presentation, because that's 15 points. Arguments is 20 points. Accuracy of your information is 15. Organization is 10. Your reasoning, your style, your voice, your gestures, and your stance. So those are the areas in which you're being judged. So I'm just repeating it for you so you pay attention to these things when you come to present as debaters. So I found that even though you had a perfect opportunity, not having the proposals, you would have then been able to push forward your definitions, your analysis in a very strong way. I found that that was an area that you were a little lacking in. However, when you went in, Mr. First Speaker, to leveraging the variety, you spoke about a company that competes through multiple channels, is a successful company, numerous tourism models, and you acknowledge the value of the port tourism, but you speak about extending the port tourism, but you focused on the fact that it ought not to be the only one. And I found that to be very excellent. You dealt with the motion in detail at the end and spoke about the cruise ships, etc. But that should kind of been at the beginning, especially because we didn't have a proposer. So being a debater, even though you have a script in front of you, it's at this stage that you're learning to think on your feet, right? So when you get an opportunity like this now, outline and set up your definitions and all the things you did at the end, all of that would have been very good at the top. And you dealt with the import tourism descriptions and so on. But then as the first speaker, you have 7 minutes and you started off very strong, but in the end, your voice was dipping. So my thing is this: start strong, finish strong. Right, Mr. Ellis? All right. Our second
Yes, miss.
speaker
Thank you so
now,
much.
Mr. Demar Ferguson, Masters Ferguson. You, sir, got a very good, you got the baton second, and your first speaker, Mr. Ellis, would have started the race very well. He explained, as I said, at the end, he went into the explanation. You came again, but again, what I found a little lacking was the analysis, definition, interpretation, which is something you have to pay attention to. However, you explained why the import tourism can compete with diversity. So that was an excellent point. You spoke about successful tourism economies and how they're diversified, as I said, so that's really, really good. But my constructive criticism for you is that you need to reread your material so that you're more familiar with the content. And we found that because there was a little, the more familiar you are with your content, the easier it is for you to convincingly present it. And so for me, that is why you were kind of box shuffling in the middle. You had a few words that were giving you trouble, but what you do in those circumstances is use your pauses. You notice you use your pauses when you struggle, you use your pauses and you use your diction to cover any kind of issues that you're having. Slow it down, speed it up, slow it down, and therefore it brings the audience in, and sometimes it shows that if you enunciate a little, they won't know that you're making a mistake. You understand? So if you find that you're shuffling, just slow it down a little and smile a little, look in the camera and breathe a little, and therefore you'll be able to manage when you take a moment, and nobody will know that you're taking a moment to compose yourself, right? All right, so COVID reference was good, about how, certain things like that can affect when you have one stream of income. It could have gone haywire, fragile. You said port tourism is fragile in times of crisis, excellent point. And, national competitiveness, that would have been an excellent point if you weren't book shuffling and trying to pronounce the words and stuff. So that's what I'm saying. Take your time. Your posture is important because, as I said, voice is 5 marks, gestures is 5 points, and your stance is 5 points. So that's 15, and style is 10, so that's 25. You understand? And those points, it doesn't have anything to do with your content. It has to do with the way you present, right? So that is to make you a stronger presenter. Now, the 2 judges here, we were agreed that our third speaker, Mr. Andrew Kamak, would have been the best speaker for us, primarily because he had a very good presence and diction. He was extremely familiar with the content of his work. But I think when you're so familiar with the content, Mr. Kamak, I want to see the confidence with you, giving us more eye contact. All right? So you can't,
Yes, ma'am.
and as I said, very good content. And I love the part where he said you can't out the private islands. And when you're making those good points, they stick because they resound very well. And you say you don't compete with the synthetic knockoffs, and they're very, very good. But as I said, for you, Mr. Kamak, we want a little more. It was clear to me that you were familiar with the content, but stop reading so much. Look at us, look at the screen, because we're watching you, right? But all in all, very good effort, and very, very excellent presentation. And I thank you, gentlemen, for what you did for us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you, miss.
Okay, thank you so much. And I wanted to just remind our students that Mr. Gave Watt, who is representing the observer, will have to view the match himself as well, so that we can tally the points and present it. Now, from my experiences with private island, I just wanted to put a few pointers. I think your proposing team would have said this. Private islands do offer entertainment. It's not small like what you probably are used to with Lime Key. They're actually very huge islands and out islands and all these private islands. Most of these islands are bought by celebrities for millions and millions and millions of dollars, maybe as much as a hotel. So Michael Jackson has an island. This movie star, a lot of movie stars, Celine Dion, that writer there that does Medea, he has his own island. There's a lot of money that goes on private islands. There's also a lot of yachting and private boats and investment that go on islands. So there's a whole lot of money with private islands. And because the islands that are bought not only on the European side, but closer to the North America, like islands that you'd find in the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, there's banking opportunities. There's also that $1 with private islands closer to the USA. So I believe Hampton would have given you a run if they had stuck it out. But I just want you to know that there's a lot that go on the islands, a lot of events, a lot of basketball. And I can say this why, because I worked on one. So I know exactly what happens on these private islands and the type of funding that happens and goes through the islands, right? So we want to thank our guest judge and chief judge, attorney at law Stacey Ann Young, and also Mr. Alden Reed, who is representing the Jamaica Hotel and Tourism Association. This was a very, very, very good motion. We actually have another one about ports that we were contemplating, but I'm happy we made this one our motion for today. Match 3 will feature the Carteret College and Glenmore High. We're looking forward to that, right? So stay tuned. It was a fantastic presentation by Cornwall College. I'm your host, Michelle Tulloh, and we'd like to thank our sponsors for making this all possible. See you next time. Thank you.